You ever wonder what makes certain fantasy worlds just stick, like they become these legends in the hobby? What is it about, say, Dragonlance that gives it that legendary status in D&D history?
Hmm.
What makes that specific world, that saga, resonate so deeply with people, even now?
That's a great question. And I think um, it's more than just being a cool setting, right? It feels lived in.
Yeah.
Like it has real history, real people facing, well, impossible odds sometimes.
Yeah, like a place you could almost believe exists.
Exactly. You don't just visit Krynn, you kind of live there for a bit while you're reading or playing.
Totally. And that's exactly what we're diving into today. We're looking at the legendary Dragonlance saga and, its lasting impact on tabletop role-playing. We've got some great source material here from LitRPG Reads articles focusing on the characters, the history, basically what makes it tick.
Yeah, our goal here is sort of to unpack what makes Dragonlance so special, so enduring. We're going to pull out the key ideas from these sources, look at the world, Krynn itself, the history, those iconic weapons, and definitely the characters. They're unforgettable.
It's going to be a fun look back at a classic guided by this material.
Okay, so let's start with the world itself. Krynn. That's the stage for everything, right? All the big conflicts, the personal stories, it all happens on Krynn.
And the material makes it clear, like, while it's a whole planet, pretty much all the action we know about from the books, the games, it's focused on just two continents, Ansalon and Teledos.
Right. And what's beyond them? Who knows? It's largely unexplored in the main stories, which actually I kind of like. It keeps the focus tight but leaves that sense of mystery around the edges.
It definitely anchors things. But what really makes Krynn feel different, especially compared to other D&D worlds, are the people. Well, the races living there.
Oh yeah, you've got your standard fantasy folk, sure. Humans are dominant, like in a lot of settings. Elves, dwarves, gnomes, they're all there.
But Krynn really puts the spotlight on a couple of races you don't see nearly as much elsewhere.
That's where the Kender and the Minotaurs come in. Big time. They aren't just, rare encounters or monsters tucked away in a dungeon. In Krynn, they're major parts of the world. They have societies, they trade, they fight wars, they're integrated.
The Kender especially, with their unique approach to property.
Yeah, their handling skills. And that endless curiosity. They bring this chaotic energy, but also, surprisingly often, real bravery. And the Minotaurs aren't just monsters either. They're often shown with this structured, honor-bound society. Having them as major players really changes the whole vibe of the world compared to, say, the Forgotten Realms early on.
And you absolutely cannot talk Dragonlance without talking dragons. I mean, it's right there in the name.
It really is. And Krynn's got both kinds, right? The chromatic evil ones and the metallic good ones. Their power levels, their numbers, they sort of wax and wane throughout history, but they are always, always important.
What these sources really highlight, though, and this feels key, is that the dragons aren't just big, scaly monsters guarding treasure.
Exactly. They're characters.
Yeah.
Like complex characters with their own goals, their own motivations, their own histories, and they have these really important connections to the main mortal characters. That's a huge difference from a lot of fantasy.
It makes them feel much more central to the actual story, not just the conflict.
Totally. They have personalities, they scheme, they hold grudges, they can even form bonds. It adds so much depth when the giant flying death machine actually has a point of view. Their actions drive the plot in really significant ways.
Okay, so we've got unique races, central dragons. What about the gods? The divine structure seems pretty distinct too.
Yeah, the sources point that out. It's not like some settings with dozens and dozens of gods. It's more focused.
There's a high god, kind of the ultimate creator.
Right, but the ones mortals usually deal with are his three children. There's Paladin, the big good guy, Platinum Dragon God, Tachesis, the Queen of Darkness, the ultimate evil, and Gillian, holding down the neutral territory, the god of balance and knowledge.
And then there are all the moon gods, separate from that main trio.
Yep, Solinari for good magic, Lunatari for neutral, and Nuitari, the black moon, for evil magic. And this setup is crucial because it directly ties into where magic comes from on Krynn.
Ah, right. The sources explain that. Clerics get their juice from Paladin, Tachesis, or Gillian, depending on their faith and alignment.
And wizards draw power from the three moons. The phases of the moons, their alignment, it all affects the different orders of high sorcery. It's a really neat, integrated system for both divine and arcane magic.
So, Krynn is this world with unique people, important dragons, specific gods.
Yeah.
But it's also got this really deep history that hangs over everything.
Oh, absolutely. The history is divided into these 5 big chunks, the 5 ages, and each one is marked by these massive world-changing events. The sources are clear, though. Most of the books and games we know, They happen in the 4th and 5th ages.
Right. Let's quickly walk through them, starting at the beginning.
Okay, first up, the time of creation. Pretty self-explanatory. Krynn gets made, the gods show up. The sources say, we don't know a ton about this time. It's more mythic backstory than detailed history.
Then comes the Age of Dreams. This is where mortals start to become a big deal.
Exactly. First civilizations pop up, the different races spread out. Mortals start flex their muscles on the world stage. It's also when you get the first big dragon wars. 3 of them actually fought between the dragons themselves. It ends with the 3rd dragon war.
Okay, Age of Dreams, then the Age of Might. This one sounds ominous.
It was. The sources describe it as catastrophic. There's this huge event, the cataclysm. Basically, the gods got angry, dropped a fiery mountain on the main empire, Istar. It completely changed the map, drowned entire regions, wiped out civilizations.
Wow. Yeah, that sounds like something that would leave a mark.
A massive mark, physically on the world and psychologically on the survivors. The cataclysm echoes through everything that comes after. It's the defining disaster.
Which leads right into the 4th age, the Age of Despair. This is the classic era, right? The War of the Lance.
Yep. This is where the original Chronicles and Legends novels are set. Tons of the old D&D modules. It's the time of the companions, the rise of the dragon armies, the return of the dark goddess Takisis. It's probably the most famous period.
And then the 5th age, the Age of Mortals. More recent novels and modules are set here.
Right. This age kicks off with events like the Chaos War, which leads into the War of Souls. A big theme here, as the sources point out, is what happens when the gods actually leave Krynn. It explores the consequences of that divine absence.
So understanding these ages gives you this framework, the sense that Krynn isn't static. It's constantly changing, shaped by gods, dragons, mortals.
Exactly. It's a world with real momentum, real consequences.
Speaking of defining elements, the Dragonlances themselves, the weapons, the whole thing is named after.
Yeah, crucial. Though, funny enough, the sources point out they aren't always the main focus of every single story arc, but boy, when they show up, they matter.
And their origin ties right back into that history we just talked about.
Totally. They were forged way back at the end of the Age of Dreams. Their whole purpose, killing dragons. Back then, they were literally the only things mortals had that could reliably hurt a dragon.
And making them wasn't easy, right? The sources mention God-blessed artifacts.
Yep. Super rare process. You needed these special artifacts blessed by Paladin. Greater Dragonlances needed 2 artifacts, lesser ones needed 1. That rarity makes them even more significant when they're rediscovered during the War of the Lance.
They come in different sizes, too, for different kinds of fighting.
Right, you've got the Footman's Lance, maybe 8 feet long or so, good for fighting dragons on the ground or maybe from horseback. And then there are these massive ones, huge lances, meant to be used by heroes riding on the backs of good dragons fighting evil dragons in the sky.
It's interesting they named the whole setting after the weapons, even if they aren't in every scene. The sources mention the link to classic European dragon-slaying myths.
It feels right. It sets the tone, doesn't it? Mortals, with divine help, can actually stand up to these seemingly invincible forces. It's a symbol of hope, of heroism.
Okay, now let's get to what a lot of people, myself included, think is the absolute core of why Dragonlance lasts. The characters.
Oh, 100%. The source material really hammers this home, especially those articles on the most memorable characters. Dragonlance lives and breathes through its cast. They might start from familiar fantasy types, archetypes.
The warrior, the wizard, the thief.
Exactly. But the saga takes them so much further. It digs deep, makes them feel incredibly real, flawed, complex. They grow, they change, they break your heart sometimes.
They feel human, even the elves and dwarves. Let's talk about some of the big ones highlighted here.
Yeah.
Got to start with Tanis Half-Elven, right? The leader?
Tanis, yeah. He's sort of the reluctant leader of the original companions. Being half-elf, he's got that classic inner conflict, belonging to 2 worlds, but fully fitting in neither. The sources call him a brilliant tactician, great archer.
But it's that internal struggle that's key. He seems to want peace more than war, even though he's good at it. He's the one who pulls the old friends back together for the War of the Lance, and afterwards, he's trying to hold things together.
Yeah, he's central to that early saga. He even helped stop his half-brother Raceland's bid for godhood. His death later on is really poignant too. Killed from behind, not some glorious sacrifice. The source says it felt like the end of an era. For many, he is Dragonlance's main protagonist.
And speaking of his half-brother, Raceland Majer, probably the most famous character overall.
Oh, Raceland.
Yeah.
He casts a long shadow. Arrogant, cold, cynical, physically frail compared to his twin brother. But, like the sources stress, He is so much more than just a stereotype bad guy mage.
His backstory is just brutal. Weak kid, bullied, always in his brother Caramon's shadow. Then he takes this magical test that nearly kills him, leaves him with golden skin, hourglass eyes, seeing decay everywhere. Yeah, that wouldn't make anyone cheerful.
Right. And it pushes him. He achieves incredible magical power, but usually for himself, seeking more power, ultimately godhood itself.
Well,
His brother tries so hard to save him from that path.
But the twist is that sacrifice at the end.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Despite everything, he makes this choice, this sacrifice that basically saves the world. It's complex, it's debated, but it's incredibly compelling. The sources aren't wrong calling him one of the best, most nuanced characters in D&D fiction, period.
And then there's the other twin, Caramon Majer.
Caramon, the big, strong, good-hearted warrior twin. The sources paint him as incredibly loyal, maybe sometimes too loyal to Raceland, but just fundamentally a good guy. He's the rock for a lot of the group, and fans love him for just being decent.
His journey is rough, though, tied so closely to Raceland's darkness. He deals with alcoholism, time travel, shenanigans, seeing what his brother could become. But he overcomes it, raises a family.
Yeah, he goes through so much. His death is described as peaceful, which feels earned after all the strife.
Yeah.
And that relationship between him and Raceland, it's the heart of the whole thing, especially in the Twins trilogy. Just phenomenal character work.
Okay, switching gears a bit. Kitiara Uthmatar, the Blue Lady.
Ooh, Kit. Yeah. A major player. Human-female fighter, commander of the Blue Dragon Army, fierce, ambitious, dangerous. The sources rightly say she's not to be messed with and is absolutely key to the conflict.
She's also Raceland and Caramon's half-sister and Tanis's former lover. That's a complicated web, and she allies with Lord Soth, the Death Knight.
Right. But what makes her great, according to the sources, is that she's not just defined by those relationships. She's got her own agenda, always. She leads the heroes, makes her own path, seeks power and glory on her own terms.
She is a survivor, gets through the War of the Lance mostly on her own skill. Her end is tied to her brother's, but it feels like her choice, ultimately. Killed by Dalamar the Dark, Raceland's apprentice.
The sources love her because she's always changing, always moving. But her actions make sense for her. She's unpredictable, but logical within her own ambition. Very memorable.
Goldmoon. She's another really key female character.
Definitely one of the most famous. She's there right from the start. Descendant of heroes, married to Riverwind, ends up being the longest living of the original companions. The sources argue she's kind of a main character across the whole saga, really.
Her journey starts with her quest as this barbarian princess, finding the blue crystal staff. That drives the early plot. But she keeps growing, becomes a prophetess later on. Even her death is a major event.
Yeah, she's seen as really lovable, deep. Her resurrection later causes some fan debate. The sources mention that. But she feels like a true protagonist. And her death, being the last of the original heroes of the Lance to go, really feels like the end of that first vision for the series.
And then Lorana Kanan, the Elven princess. Laura Lanthalos.
Lana. Yeah, Princess of the Qual and Esti Elves, another hero of the Lance, elf fighter. The sources call her maybe the most beautiful and deadly woman on Krynn. Starts out a bit naive, maybe spoiled, head over heels for Tanis.
But she grows so much through the war. Earns her place, definitely. Her rivalry with Kitiara, especially over Tanis, is huge. And she ends up with Tanis even after Kit technically beats her in a duel.
And she becomes the Golden General, leads the Whitestone forces. Basically, she's the strategic winner of the War of the Lance. Her end is heroic too, dying while helping kill the Green Dragon Barrel. The sources praise that transformation from sheltered princess to respected leader. You're really rooting for her by the end.
Gotta talk about Tasselhoff Burfoot, the Kender.
You can't not love Tass. He is Kender, always wandering into trouble, finding things, messing with maps, time traveling. He helps Caramon stop Raceland, which is huge. The sources capture him perfectly. Pure heart, zero fear, endless curiosity, total mischief maker. Just lovable chaos.
His death is surprisingly epic for a Kender wounding chaos itself. But then, because it's Tass, he time travels just before dying, which messes things up later and lets him come back. Sort of.
It's very Tass. He's fiercely loyal, though. The image of him waiting with Flint in the afterlife, that hits hard.
Yeah.
He really matures, becomes someone you're proud of. He holds a really special place for fans.
Flint Fireforge, the grumpy dwarf.
Flint. Yeah, he's the classic dwarf in many ways. Great craftsman, tough fighter, complains a lot. But the sources point out he's more than the stereotype. He's the gruff father figure, especially to Tass.
And he has these real, relatable fears. Terrified of boats and horses, which of course means he's always on boats and horses. And he surprises everyone by befriending elves, learning their language, shows he can grow.
His death is touching because it's so Normal. A heart attack during a crisis, not some big battle scene. He was the second companion to go. Finds peace waiting for his friends in the afterlife. Solid character.
Sturm Brightblade, the knight in shining armor.
Sturm, the man of conviction. Lives by the knight's code, even when makes things hard. The sources say whether you agreed with him or not, you had to respect his dedication. He will be honorable, no matter what.
Drives his friends nuts sometimes with the rigidity, but they respect him. His death, fighting Kitiara, is a huge moment in the War of the Lance. Leaves behind a son with her, which is complicated.
His reward in the afterlife feels right, though. Becomes the paragon of discipline. The sources say he earned that honor through his unwavering commitment. Not always fun, but definitely memorable.
And last but not least from the main group, Fizban the Fabulous.
Fizban. The old, seemingly clumsy wizard who pops up with Tass, helps out in mysterious ways, maybe accidentally sets things on fire.
The sources mention the Kender think he's Paladine, the god of light, partly because he's friends with Tass, and, well, maybe he is. It's that classic fan favorite theory. The source wisely just hints at it, leaving the mystery but calling him integral.
He absolutely is. And beyond those main folks, the sources list so many others. Alhana Starbreeze, Cressania, Riverwind, Bupu the Gully Dwarf, Kaz the Minotaur, Astinis the Historian. Even minor characters add so much flavor.
Yeah, people like Mina from the later books, or Gilthanas, Lorna's brother, they all fill out the world, make Krynn feel populated and real, even if we only get snippets from these sources.
It really does. And just as vital as the mortal characters are the dragons themselves, not just as a force, but as individuals, the sources make a point to highlight some key dragons who are real characters.
Let's circle back to them. Ski, or Kilindros, the blue dragon.
Ski, yeah. Huge blue dragon, Kitiara's mount during the War of the Lance. Evil, fought for Tychesis. But the interesting part, he eventually turns against Tychesis. Gets mortally wounded for it.
And he wasn't even from Krynn originally, right? An alien dragon.
Exactly. Which showed that even these powerful draconic allies of the gods could have their own agendas. Kept you guessing about their true motives. He was eventually killed by Malistrix, one of the later dragon overlords.
Tilvara, the silver dragon.
A good dragon, metallic. Often took the form of a wilder elf. Her sister was actually Huma's dragon mount way back when. She falls for Gilthanas, Lorana's brother.
Their adventures were pretty important, weren't they? Liberating a dragon orb, saving good dragon eggs.
Yeah, vital stuff for the future of good dragons. The sources say even with less page time, she earned her spot as a hero and became a really important part of the universe.
Molistrix, or Molistrix, the big red dragon overlord.
Terrifying.
Yeah.
Huge red dragon, maybe the most powerful overlord in the Fifth Age. She was one of the first to show up after the Chaos War, built Skull Totem, became the main threat in the Dragons: A New Age trilogy.
Also an alien dragon, seeing Krynn as ripe for the taking.
Yep, tried to become a god herself. Eventually defeated by the Heroes of the Heart, killed by Mina. But her presence reshaped parts of Krynn. And the sources note her obsession with magical artifacts, not just raw power, was a new angle for dragon villains.
Verdant leaf glow, the green dragon with a weird path.
Verdant's story is wild. Green dragon, so supposed to be evil. Starts out that way, involved in some bad stuff, gets left for dead. But then she ends up helping gully dwarves. Gets killed, reborn to serve them again.
And starts worshipping Reorx, the dwarf god. That's unexpected for a green dragon.
Totally. She protects the gully dwarves, saves them, prevents a war, and through that she earns her freedom, loses her green color, becomes metallic, finds redemption. Her future is her own. Great arc.
Beryl, another green dragon, but way more typical evil.
Beryl, yeah, Beryl Inthinox. Big, evil green. Her thing, according to the sources, was magical artifacts, obsessed with hoarding them to boost her power, tortured Palin Bashir, destroyed the Academy of Sorcery, very ruthless.
Pride led to her downfall, though, attacking Qualinost.
And she got taken down by a Dragonlance wielded by Lorana. The sources use her to show dragons can be dangerous through cunning and obsession, not just brute force.
Cyan Bloodbane, the nightmare dragon of Sylvanesti.
Kirshen Sintel, another huge, cruel green dragon. Known for cunning, though the sources say he lost a lot of fights. Famous for mentally enslaving the Elf King Lorak, creating that nightmare realm. Served Raceland for a while.
Tried to destroy Sylvanesti later, but got shot down by archers.
Yeah, his end was kind of anticlimactic, but fitting for his sneaky, cruel nature. Never seen again.
And the Draconians get a mention, too.
Right, the dragon men created by Tychesis, corrupted metallic dragon eggs, made the evil foot soldiers for the War of the Lance, the Baaz, Capac, etc. Known for those nasty death throes.
But then they tried corrupting chromatic eggs.
Yeah, out of desperation. and accidentally created the noble draconians who tended towards good. Most were killed right away by the dragon armies, fearing them. Only a few survived, their fate unknown. A really tragic creation.
Then there's Cinder, Fenelisten, the ambitious Red.
Ambitious, but maybe not smart enough. Killed his rivals, became a minor dragon lord, enslaved people, got taken out by adventurers after pushing too far. Kind of an ignominious end for a big red.
And Darlantan, a silver dragon from one of the novels.
Yeah, the dragons. Sources say he's presented more sympathetically, more nuanced. Not perfectly good, not purely evil. A refreshing take on a dragon character, not just driven by standard vices.
So yeah, mortals, dragons, the characters are just incredibly well developed across the board.
Yeah.
Flaws, growth, motivations, it all resonates.
And that depth, combined with the world and the history, is exactly why Dragonlance blew up the way it did, especially in its original home, tabletop RPGs.
Right. It wasn't novels first. It started as an AD&D campaign setting.
Debut for first edition AD&D, carried over into second edition, then kind of went its own way system-wise. The sources call it a testament to how important settings could be back then, even before Forgotten Realms really took over everything.
It basically created one of the first really huge shared worlds in RPG history. Even if it's less prominent now in official D&D, its fingerprints are all over modern world-building expectations.
Absolutely. Players who came up with Dragonlance expected that level of story, history, character depth. It raised the bar. The sources mentioned some key products.
Like the very first one, Dragons of Despair from '84.
Yeah, the first module. Looks simple now, maybe, but it was revolutionary then, creating this whole new universe within an adventure module. Tied directly to the first novels, it launched the whole thing, games and books.
Gameplay was okay, but maybe a bit railroady, and some questionable rating.
Oh. Yeah, the prose could be rough in spots, but still, it's considered the best of the Dragonlance modules, often makes top D&D module lists. A real landmark. Then came the big one, the Dragonlance Adventures sourcebook in 1987.
The guide, right. Everything you needed to run a campaign in Krynn, races, geography, gods, history.
It was huge, super well received, became a major part of AD&D, had rules for Krynn-specific stuff like the wizards and the moons, alignments, but you could still bring in standard characters. It was massively popular, right up there with Greyhawk for a while. Beloved stuff.
Then things shifted in '96 with the Dragonlance 5th Age game.
Right. They moved away from D&D dice entirely, introduced the saga card system. Meant to be faster, more story-focused. It worked pretty well. Reviewers liked it, players mostly reacted positively to the system itself. It felt like a narrative leap, even if it started separating Dragonlance from core D&D.
And then Wizards of the Coast bought TSR.
Yeah. Dragonlance got one last official D&D update for 3rd edition. That was kind of the end of the direct relationship with WOTC publishing the game rules.
WOTC licensed the game rights back to Margaret Weis and Tracy Hickman, right, who partnered with Sovereign Press.
Exactly. They kept publishing game material for a while, first using the D20 system, then their own. WOTC kept the fiction rights. And the sources definitely mentioned fans are itching for more, maybe even a Dragonlance LitRPG novel someday.
It just shows the staying power, crossing editions, even different game systems. The core world and story were that strong.
And it wasn't just books and tabletop. It branched out into other media too, though. With mixed results.
Video games? The sources list quite a few, mostly PC back in the day. RPGs, action games.
Yeah. Heroes of the Lance, 88, side-scroller, based on the first module. Did okay, apparently, but the NES version was awful. Dragons of Flame, the sequel, less well-regarded.
War of the Lance, a strategy game from '89. Critically liked, but didn't sell. Dragon Strike from '90, the flight sim RPG hybrid. Cool idea, but ignored by players.
Shadow Sorcerer, 91, sequel to Dragons of Flame, but better. An action RPG, still didn't sell great.
Then the gold box games, those were big. Champions of Krynn in '90. First proper turn-based Dragonlance RPG. Got great reviews, even if the engine was a bit old. Most successful game yet.
Followed by Death Knights of Krynn in 91, more of the same but better. Ranked pretty high among D&D games. But the third one, The Dark Queen of Krynn in 92, disaster. Buggy, felt like a step back, sales tanked.
There was also a long-running MUSH text-based online game.
Yeah, Dragonlance. Harder to get into, but apparently super faithful to the setting, big for that niche community. And then the cartoon.
Oh boy. Dragonlance, Dragons of Autumn Twilight, 2008. Direct-to-video. Had a good voice cast, but yeah.
Not well received, putting it mildly. Trying to cram the whole first book into 90 minutes. Rushed story, animation looked dated. The sources call it one of the worst animated fantasy films. Ouch.
And its failure basically killed any plans for more animated movies, though Tracy Hickman still hopes for something someday. And the sources did mention new novels are coming, which is great news.
Yeah, so the animation didn't work out, but the core saga clearly keeps going in book form, and it's still inspiring players and GMs.
Which is the perfect segue. How can you, listening right now, use all this amazing Dragonlance detail, this history, these characters for your own campaigns? Because the sources make it clear it's a goldmine.
Oh, absolutely. Just the lore itself, the ages, the specific feel of the races like Kender and Minotaurs being common, the way the gods and moons affect magic, the different types of dragons and their roles. You could build a whole campaign setting just inspired by that. Or just grab bits and pieces to make your own world feel deeper.
And the characters, we spent so much time on them because they're so rich. Tanis's conflict, Raceland's ambition, Kitiara's independence, Caramon's loyalty, Tass's chaos, Flint's grumpiness, Sturm's honor.
All fantastic inspiration for PCs, NPCs, villains. You can borrow their struggles, their relationships, their flaws to make your own characters feel more real. Think about the dragons as characters too. Sky's shifting loyalty, Mollustrix's artifact obsession, Verdon's redemption. So many ideas.
Even the way the stories are structured. Big, epic quests, wars, but also really personal struggles, like Caramon fighting alcoholism, characters like Kit going off and doing their own thing. That can inspire campaign arcs, character motivations, party dynamics.
And hey, if you want help generating that kind of detailed content, backstories, NPCs, world details inspired by this level of depth, the sources mentioned the LitRPG Adventures Workshop AI tools. They're specifically designed for that kind of thing, a modern tool for tapping into that classic fantasy feel.
It really drives home how much Dragonlance shaped not just the stories we tell, but how we build the worlds for those stories in RPGs.
It really did. This whole deep dive just reinforces it. The level of detail, the focus on character, the narrative scope. It was groundbreaking stuff back then, and it still holds up.
So wrapping up our deep dive into Krynn, what really lasts about Dragonlance is that whole package, isn't it? The rich world, the epic history, those unforgettable characters, and yeah, the huge impact it had on RPGs.
Definitely. And the material we looked at from LitRPG Reads, it's a really great starting point if you want to learn more, revisit the characters, or just get a feel for why it's so beloved. They did a good job capturing that magic.
Yeah, big thanks to LitRPG Reads for putting these sources together. And a special shout out to Paul Bello, sounds like a fine fellow. Seriously, thanks for the material that guided our chat today.
It was a great lens to look back at the saga and appreciate its legacy.
And to you, our listener, we'd love to hear your thoughts. What are your best Dragonlance memories? Who's your favorite character? Did this spark any ideas for your own games? Let us know in the comments or wherever you connect with the show.
Yeah, definitely share those stories and maybe leave you with a couple of questions inspired by the sources, things to ponder from the lore. What did happen to those few surviving noble draconians? What's the real deal with Fizban? And, after the animated movie, will we ever get another Dragonlance adaptation on screen that does justice to those amazing novels?
Excellent questions to chew on. Until next time.